Welcome, everybody. This is Darin Francis with Harbinger Lane, and this is the Signals in Higher Education podcast. With me today, we have Devyn Maguire from Runwayz. Devyn, welcome.
Hi, Darin. Happy to be here.
Glad we could do this and take some time. So we're doing a series on experiential learning, and we've been talking about so many different paths typically in the higher ed space. And I think it's made a lot of sense to, when thinking about kind of career connected learning, really kind of broaden out our conversations from just traditional 4-year institutions and 2-year institutions to what's happening on the K-12 side as well. And so I really wanted to kind of get a sense for what you guys are doing at Runwayz and how you're impacting the path for students into meaningful careers. Toward that end, though, I'd love to start with your own story. I think there's not a lot of CEOs that started out as elementary school teachers. And so if you could just help us understand your journey to CEO of Runwayz, what's that been like?
Yeah, I think one word that a mentor of mine was speaking with me on just yesterday was serendipitous. I think, if you navigate through the world just open to the opportunities they bring you, it's kind of what I think my journey has been. Full transparency, as we get into the workforce side of the house, I've grown through and been a big part of the academic engine. I'll speak on the elementary side all the way up through university level. I think like many people, when you're in that mindset of, the college first, I kind of discounted all of the great work on this other side. So I'm also excited to just dive in with you of this evolution, this really pinnacle point that I think we are at as a country and more broadly as a world, to just better serve everyone, regardless of your background and your journey. So it's been a really interesting ride. As you said, started as an elementary teacher by happenstance. I have 2 incredible parents, they're my heroes. Mom, special education teacher. Dad was his claim to fame, that is my fun fact at any party, was he was Charlotte's local weatherman once upon a time, who also kept his eyes and ears open to opportunity and stumbled his way into tech and then grew through technology on the neurology side of the house. So I'm kind of a combination of both of them. And my dad instilled in me, you don't have to have a set job in mind. You really just need to figure out your subject, become a subject matter expert, and everything else will kind of find its way. So that, hooked into me. But when I was in high school, I thought I was going to pursue psychology. Actually went to school for psychology, had a fantastic honors advisor at UIC who said, I think you're fighting this education thing. And she was right. I had a classroom in my basement growing up as a kid, like rows of desks that my mom had sourced and a chalkboard, and she'd bring all of her materials home, and I'd make my younger cousins, if they listen, they still make fun of me to this day. I'd make them do worksheets, and then I'd grade them really harshly for the power trip of it. So I think I was always meant to be in education, and the advisor really helped me. She forecasted, I think you'll head down this path, but you're not going to stay in the classroom. And she was right. So it's a long tail, but I loved my time in the classroom. I had the best kids and families. I am still very close with a number of my former teaching colleagues. There's nothing like the camaraderie of being in it together. And I learned so many of the skills that I use today, every day, through that journey, and just really was interested in pursuing how could I impact more lives on a higher level. And that's really how I got into the seat today.
It actually makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I too, I'm the product of actually 2 teachers. My mom was an elementary school teacher. My dad was a high school teacher. And it makes complete sense to me that good leaders would come from having been teachers, right? It's almost a muscle that you have to develop as a leader in order to facilitate growth as a team is in working together collaboratively is to have taught on some level. So I love that connection to your journey. And I know also you, as you've kind of gone through your career, you've spent some time leading strategic partnerships in the ed tech space. And so you also really understand what it means to create meaningful and transformative partnerships as well. Talk a little bit about that part of your journey and how that's also sort of informed your thinking about the market and you're thinking about like your own team's execution on your goals at Runwayz.
Yeah, I think, again, I've just been lucky to have these opportunities. And one of my formative experiences was teaching. The other one was working in an ed tech startup. And we joke with my colleagues of my former company, it was the MBA. Like, you can go and pay a lot of money for an MBA. I think that's a fantastic path for a lot of people. It wasn't attainable for me, connects to the Runwayz cause and mission. But joining a startup, stumbling into that, doing sales, knocking on doors, cold calling professors, being shoved out of offices, really grows you as an individual. My former organization was one that was very mission aligned, very scrappy, and, again, in the trenches together, lifelong friendships, learned immensely through that journey, and had the pleasure of being able to find ways to be strategic. And my former CSO, Casey Gandam, kind of took me under his wing and helped expose me to the world of strategic partnerships. Many of the other leaders in that organization helped me with seeing, how do you plan your organizational journey? How do you take care of your people? We all, I think it's fair to say, learned a lot through that. So now I joke, like, I'm really just applying a lot of that playbook that I learned by failing a lot over here, and just trying to stand up, again, a mission-oriented organization that really cares about the solution we're solving. I think if that's your focus, everything else is easier, because forming a partnership with someone else that sees the value in what you're trying to bring into the world, it's easy, right? It's like, hey, if we're all trying to do right by kids in this room, then figuring out how to do that together, can come together. There's bumps and bruises of how to make two entities work together, but I think at the heart of it, we're just trying to help more kids, and we're trying to surround ourselves with people who also want to help kids. And we're trying to stay away from those that don't have those intentions.
I love that. There's a lot there for me listening to you talk about it, because it's, as somebody who spent my career primarily in the partnership side as well, there's another magic that I think you get from having led sales and gone through the sales evolution as a leader, because, and you mentioned it, right? Like, you actually prepare to have failure, right? Failures are what you need along the path to success. And in sales, you regularly fail, whether you failure as in I didn't get the deal, as opposed to failure, I didn't do the job, right? But I think understanding things in that black and white way, I think, also allows you to really show up as a very authentic leader. And I think that level of authenticity builds trust along the way. So what has it been? Maybe 3 or 4 months now since you've been in the role as CEO?
Yes, I joined really as I was leaving my last organization. Runwayz was brought to me when it was very, very early, and I really didn't know what my fit was with it. My colleague, Brett Felton, I'll give him a plug. I was still on my maternity leave at the time, and he kind of kept bugging me about this Runwayz idea. It's like, I think there's really something here. I think it's something you'd be interested in. I was like, Brett, first of all, I'm focused on this little human at this moment. I don't even know what I want to do next. I don't think I want to go into a startup, let alone this early of a stage startup right now. I have one baby. I don't know if I need two. But the more I learned about it, and the more I spent time in it and saw the potential of what it could become, I kind of became a bit obsessed, and then joined with the intention, honestly, of just focusing in on the customer success side. That was what they brought me in to do. And the more I was here working with the team, realized that there was a bigger need and a bigger space that I could fill, really getting everybody, as our CSO, Mike, likes to say, like, just getting everyone in the right seat. There's a lot of people, as one does in a startup, wearing a lot of hats, and some of those hats weren't the right hats for their strengths. So it was actually slowing down progress. So by coming in and really shifting everyone into the right seat, and then identifying, okay, what seats don't we have filled that kind of led to me stepping in to the role. So again, wasn't if you told me a year ago I'd be doing this right now, I would have said absolutely not. I thought it was just going to take, maybe I'll just be an account manager. It's a great job. You get to form relationships. I can, have my headspace. I'm a little guy. But the team's been so great to work with. And so understanding of I have a 17-month-old. So understanding of what that journey is, a lot of us are parents. And again, it comes back to if we get this thing right, then I'm building something that's going to help him one day. So why wouldn't I lean in on that?
That's a good setup. Let's talk a little bit about Runwayz. I mean, you've established yourself as a unique leader coming into this role. I'm just curious, well, first of all, what drew you to Runwayz in terms of the mission, in terms of the problem that they were trying to solve? And then maybe just first circle on that, and then we'll dive a little deeper.
I think if you turn on the news, I think that this organization was on the right track before the track was really clear. So our founder has a son who came to him and was looking to become a pilot. And this story really the story that hooked me. And, they went to their large district, lots of resources, and couldn't find support to really answer, how do I get into that? It's not that there aren't flight schools but to find those resources and align it with who that individual kid was very difficult. And this is a family with resources and with access. And it got our founder having more conversations. And the more he had conversations, he realized he's not alone. He and his wife weren't the only parents thinking about this. I think we have done a fantastic job for those that are pursuing a university degree intentionally. That was intentionally designed. But we're now at a time where that isn't the fit, right, for every kid. I myself speak about my parents. My parents worked incredibly hard. My dad had a very successful career, but they still had to take out Parent Plus loans. And if you know anything about Parent Plus loans, they're not very forgiving. It's not a very forgiving program, right? And so pursuing an elementary degree, I graduated just my own journey with $1,000 in student debt every month. It's making $30,000 when I started as a teacher. I had some pathways to loan forgiveness, but they weren't really a good fit for the area I was in. It was a big factor of why I left the classroom. And I will toot my own horn. I think I was a fantastic teacher. I loved teaching. I lived for that room, right? I lived for those kids. And it was a shame that I felt like I had to pursue something else just from a stability standpoint and to have the lifestyle I wanted to have. So just coming from that journey, actually just paid off the student loans in my name this week. Still have some for my parents' name. And again, my parents completely, those that were set up well in a lot of ways, but they had 3 kids. One went to medical school, one went to graduate school. And then I went on this journey, for those families and kids who have a setup where their child can go pursue a university degree at graduation and come out the other side without debt. I think it's a fantastic pathway. I think it's the best pathway. I love everything that our university system stands for in higher education and the lessons you learn through that environment. But there's a lot of individuals that don't have that level of access or even that level of interest, right, in what they want to pursue. And then on the other side, you have a growing need of we have more jobs to fill and talent who doesn't know how to find them or doesn't think they want to fill them or a little bit of both, right? So really the more I dug in and understood that problem and started seeing it's not a either or, I think we've done a disservice of, if you upon graduation don't pursue a university degree, you're less than, or it's a fallback. Instead, I think there's an evolution happening of it doesn't have to be an either or, it can be a both. Right? Just because I pursue this path doesn't mean I never pursue a university degree. I could even pursue it alongside a different path. But we're in the age of online learning. We're in the age of micro-credentials where things are shifting and changing. I think we're finally reaching a point where those changes are coming together. And now we need to be thinking about what it's like on ground for these 15 to 25-year-olds who need to find opportunities, not 10 years from now. They don't know where to go. And that's really the idea behind what we are really calling the Runwayz project. So I'll say the the project that's surrounding is the thought leaders that we're speaking to and connecting. And then the SaaS platform is really where those connections come into reality for that age group.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the students that are at the heart of this more. When we talked before, I think you mentioned this idea of 600,000 jobs Ford couldn't fill. Like there's this statistic, right? That hit hard being from Detroit here. But behind those numbers are young people. And, as a teacher, who are the students you're thinking about as you build Runwayz? Like, talk about the different types of student journeys that you think are now possible because of Runwayz.
As I've learned more and spoken to more individuals who have been helping to solve this problem for a long time, it's much bigger than even just that one sector. We have the retirement component that compounds this problem. So for every job, for every trades professional that retires by 2028, the stat in front of me says 1 in 3 of them are going to retire by 2028, and they don't have enough of a pipeline built to replace them, right? If you look over at welding, we need over 300,000 welding professionals by 2026, and it's not that these individuals don't exist. Again, it's just the connection to them. So I personally think that a lot of it's a visibility problem. I think also it's a PR problem, if I'm being honest. Like, even if you go speak to a parent of a 17-year-old right now who has dreamed of their kid going to Harvard or the state school or their alma mater, they're aware of these opportunities. They're aware that these careers exist. They're aware that these salaries are possible, but there's still this little voice in their head, or maybe big voice, of like, that's great for another kid, but my kid's going to college, right?
Right.
So, I think in the Runwayz project, it's really solving that. I think in order to really fill these gaps and interconnect these systems, you got to start a bit with the mindsets of the families and the kids. That, when you're walking down the street of a neighborhood, that to see a sign in the yard that says a kid is going to Harvard or your local state school, that exists. But do you ever see a sign in the yard for a kid who's going to a trade school, or who's starting at Caterpillar, or who's, taking a ramp manager job at Southwest, which, by the way, fantastic K-12 program at Southwest. Never knew about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there's been this divide for a long time in the country, and we've allowed it to persist as a society. And I love that what you guys are doing is really trying to create the path or the runway for the student to have the right journey for them, right? But I'm curious, like, what do you think is happening to the students today when they're not on the traditional college track? I mean, for the most part, are we seeing any signs of success of them being able to find their right path? Like, what's the impact, do you think, currently?
We're seeing a lot of shift and change. So if you watch the funding that's being released at the administrative level, that's now focusing in on this problem. If you look at state policy, you're seeing a big change from it used to be college readiness. Now it's college, career, and military readiness. You're seeing more policy shifts where every kid needs to graduate with a pathway known versus just straight focusing in on that, graduation to university pipeline, which used to be the way that schools got their funding. So the changing in Pell Grants, like from a policy level, things are changing. That was really the big dominoes that had to fall, I think, for the rest of these things to be possible, because when your funding as a district is tied to it, then your college counselors are going to be focused on that college pathway. And it's not that they don't care about every kid. It's just their system wasn't set to support every kid, and their incentives weren't aligned to support every kid. So they are going to fall through the cracks. They were set to. And I think, that concept of white collar versus blue collar, well, I think we're really facing new collar, right? And the AI, obviously, it's changing things already. So I think because of all of these systemic changes that are happening, you're seeing some schools catch up. You're seeing colleges catch up. You're seeing shifts even at the university level. So I think over the next 5-10 years, the whole system's going to look different than it did before. That's very helpful. There's always been amazing groups, like the Carpenters Union has an amazing program. You've got Mike Rowe Foundation. There's a lot of people out there that have been working to focus in on this. Just a matter of connection and visibility. So I think, we're working with a group down in San Antonio, and we're working with a phlebotomy program. And that program, which is like many of these CTE pathways, they have an externship requirement. And one of the issues is that teacher is tasked with finding externship opportunities for his students. You think about how difficult that is to get a large hospital system to be open to your kids coming for an externship. If you're in a school that has already formed those strategic partnerships, if you will, with employers, then yeah, your kids have a way to check that box. But if you don't, then you're chasing down those opportunities or having to manage those yourself. Not scalable, very difficult. You also, based on which school you're in, it changes what type of opportunity you're getting. And what I found is not that program specifically, but many of the programs we've spoken to, it's like if a kid doesn't go get their internship or externship or pre-apprenticeship, the hours that they need with enough time, then they'll find a way to fulfill that for them, but it's not necessarily with that actual work-based experience that they were needing, right? It's like, we'll find a way to help you check the box, but it wasn't the experience you needed. So I think there's, again, like a shift happening, but we haven't shifted far enough where every program has that work-based learning experience that's going to be relevant to that student enough that they're going to graduate with the skills needed. And then you have, on the other end, employers who would like to be building that pipeline and would like to be hiring people who are younger and they're early and emerging, but they don't necessarily trust that they're prepared. And they worry about, the ROI of how much they need, how many resources they need to expense on preparing that individual for the workplace. So I have several more stories like that, but I think it's, again, just this disconnection just keeps coming up. It's not that people aren't doing great things. It's just finding ways to connect to those things.
It sounds to me like there's an ecosystem that Runwayz is forming, and that, of course, at the center of it is the student that you need to give better direction to. You've kind of expressed like how difficult it is for students and parents to help navigate an increasingly complex set of possibilities if it's not just college, right, as their next step. So if it is an ecosystem, talk about what are the important elements in it. And I bet a lot of people wouldn't understand that it could involve more than, the K-12 district and employers. So just talk a little more about the ecosystem you think you're building, and also how you're building it.
Absolutely. So, anyone who's been a part of 2-3-sided marketplaces, ecosystem work, I think you learn a lot as you go. So I'll share where we're at today. I'm sure if we have this conversation a year from now, I'll be like, oh, we knew nothing. Here's what we know now. But what we've really found today is this concept of anchors. So even internally, you use the word ecosystem. That is the word that we use as well. We very much see, there are these micro ecosystems, and then there's the macro ecosystem that is Runwayz. And each of those have their own nuance. I'm sure there are some words I've used even in our conversation today that might land funny for one person, but be a good word for another person when describing these challenges. Even at the federal level, there is a grant around helping support states build up local marketplaces for connecting young people with jobs, because we want to keep more people aware of what's available in our communities. That, I believe, is the intention behind that initiative for a number of reasons. The challenge part of that is if each state has their own thing, again, nothing against that grant. I think it's a great thing. But if each state has their own thing and you're a transient student, say you're a military kid, right? Again, I think these programs that we build I hate to say it, but as adults who we're on a different journey than what this population is on, we tend to build for them and tell them, like broccoli, eat this is good for you. But I think the biggest challenge is you got to go where they are and you have to meet them in a way they're going to use it. Otherwise, what's the point? Because if you have a beautiful website or platform that, your schools are using, and the minute they leave that high school, they never look at it again. Well, you have no way to track their post-grad data in an efficient and effective way. There are ways, but, it's messy and a challenge point that we've heard from our schools. So you have on the one side of the ecosystem, of course, the students, making it interesting to them. I think I spoke through that a little bit. And then the other side, you have a varied, a variety of different type of employers. And then you have all these other stakeholders surrounding those two parties. You have, as you spoke about, there's the workforce groups, there's chambers of commerce, there's nonprofits. So where we've really tried to focus in on is, all right, we have an anchor partner on one side and an anchor partner on the other, and then what are all the groups around them? So for instance, in Chicagoland, we have formed a partnership with an incredible nonprofit who does great work in at-risk neighborhoods. They have, a podcast room and a workshop and a maker space, and everything in their being is about wrapping that community and supporting them on whatever their journey takes place. So that's an anchor partner that we have in that Chicagoland area. We're now working to build up more anchor partners in the area through K-12 and through community colleges around Chicagoland. At the same time, we're in conversations with other great nonprofit groups that actually are employers. And, we're particularly finding that one of the best ways to activate is by going right to associations and unions, because their mission is to help build and support that workforce, right? And to be honest, I think a lot of us don't know how to connect with the next generation as well as we'd like to. So I think the service that we provide is actually learning and giving them, real-time market feedback on this is what kids are looking at in these regions, and this is what kids want to do, and this is where they're going, this is what they're interested in. So by anchoring and working with that association at the onset, they can give us feedback on what the app itself needs to look like and how to best promote them, kind of in a Glassdoor way, if you will. We auto-populate actually pages for employers coming in, so they don't have to start at square one. Once they come into the platform, all they need to do is confirm and adjust and, make it look the way that their voice wants to look. But on the entity page, it's an overview of the culture, like what it's like to work there. And then any content that they've already created that would be relevant to a job seeker. And we're serving each step of that journey. So, we have segues in our user journey of the 15 to 17 group, which is really those looking for experience and just starting to explore. Then you have that 17 to 19 group that's really in that transition period, and it's a bit of higher urgency. And then you have the more sophisticated group that gets into the 20 to 25 group where they actually are starting to have relevant experience, and it's making within the profile page of how a student brands themselves within Runwayz, making it make sense to the employers on the other side. So, when we're thinking about the ecosystem, it's anchoring one side, finding others that connect to that anchor, or anchoring the other side and finding others that connect to that anchor. So far that's been working for us, and we found some incredible partners who are giving us great guidance and feedback. They're very mission oriented. The other unique part of this puzzle of the Runwayz ecosystem is our foundation, which is set to serve through scholarships, both at the student level, and we're writing into our charter to also be able to sponsor schools and workforce programs in an area. So not only doing that connection point, but also if a kid finds an opportunity through Runwayz that they don't have the financial ability to go after, for any employer that an anchor partner at the school level helps us find, we're actually putting money through the foundation back into their pockets to help serve their kids. So, we have big goals of how this all comes together, but I think really we've been very fortunate, serendipitous, if you will, to find some incredible organizations that see the vision and really want to be a part of building that ecosystem with us.
As you're describing it, alongside of it being an ecosystem, it feels like Runwayz is the translator of the student's need and identifier of the journey that the student needs to take. Makes a lot more sense now that you've explained that in order to do this deeply and in a meaningful way for students, you have to go into specific geographies. And so you've chosen partners and then built around their geographies. So how do you see that if we look out 3 years, 5 years from now? Like, is your sense that eventually these mini ecosystems all begin to connect and there's more of a national component, or do you feel like it will still maintain a level of local, primarily local relevance? How do you see it going and growing over time?
We're open to where the journey takes us. We're not so rigid of it must look exactly like this. I think that it will be interesting to see, we have radiuses set and things like that. But of course, with employment practices, you want to make sure you're towing the right line of when you're job matching, that you are giving everyone the same opportunity. So there's the geographic component, but also we're not prohibiting someone from seeing opportunities that are well beyond their community. It's just, I like this term where, the community grown feel. I internally kind of picture this app really continuing to expand and be built in a way that maintains its authenticity, so at a time where algorithms are kind of telling us what we're supposed to buy and what we're supposed to like, we're leaning in on how do we, leverage just enough of that AI goodness to make things easy and accessible, but not so much that we lose the voice of these talented individuals and what employers need. So I think, I'd like to say the platform just is a national platform that has different filters and viewpoints. So if you're, because I think that's where it really works, is if I'm a kid at 15, doesn't know where I'm going to go, I chart a flight plan in Runwayz, which is what we coined it. Thinking I'm going to go one direction. I told you my story at the beginning, right? I thought I was going to be a clinical psychologist. Then I thought I was going to be a teacher. Then I thought I was going to be an ed tech coach. Then I thought I was going to be in sales. Now I'm sitting in this seat. So, where I hope it stays is that we can bring all these parties into the same place, because the agility that I think tomorrow's leaders need today is the ability to shift and shape. So I hope we're not forced to go in a direction where it becomes segmented, because I think that segmentation is going to hurt our kids, right? And so I like the idea that we're growing this national marketplace, maybe global at some point, but national first, stay grounded. That's really focused on like community first, and you can have a lot of say over how you create that community visual. So, if I'm sitting in a room in Milwaukee, which I am, and I'm in the app, I can see things in Milwaukee. It feels Milwaukee-ish to me. But then if I'm like, oh, what's it like to go live and work in Chicago, or go live and work in New York or LA, I can like go feel that. That's really the goodness when I talk about that authenticness is, it's not just what am I going to make in this job? It's also like, what lifestyle is this going to give to me? If I'm a young honors girl who's pursuing an opportunity, or I think I'm going to go into a university pathway, but then I'm on Runwayz and I see like, oh, I could actually go work in we'll just say moving industry, where I get to go, use all these really hands-on talents that I have, and then maybe build up a moving business. And oh, that moving business, there's this niche inside my town, and I could actually like stay here and get back to my community, and potentially if that's something she wants, to grow a family, and she can see, like, just to be able to visualize what your life becomes with saying yes to each of these opportunities along the way. I think that's where I hope the app gets to, versus being a segmented.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I know from some of the work that I've done in the last couple of years in a few different companies, that, like, if you look at allied health, for example, somebody who goes into uh, medical assisting at a hospital, gets a full-time job. Like the level of certification needed for that is pretty light. Well, they could see, oh, I might be able to make. They may ultimately have a goal of becoming a nurse, which is great, right? But they come into medical assisting, and they're likely not to persist in medical assisting for a really long time. They're more likely to look adjacent and see other opportunities, and then look for the training opportunity to, say, become a sterile processing, uh, you know, role, or go into phlebotomy, like you mentioned, right? Like there could be different levels of specialty that they keep going back to. And I could see needing Runwayz as a way to go, oh, here's where I am on my journey today. And like you went from teacher to sales rep to, and progressed, like having this additional support through an ever changing uh, uh, set of skill requirements, and ever changing set of role requirements, having something like Runwayz as my backstop, as my way of going, okay, what is the next move here? I think that it sounds like a really powerful piece of the journey.
And I feel, Darin, as you're even describing it, certain conversations make my head go light bulb. I think the piece on the employer part, I spoke a lot on the importance of making this interesting to students, but on the other side of it is the employers have to use it. There's plenty of tools out there that, they build for this interconnectivity, but the HR manager doesn't use it because they're not either incentivized to, or they're already using Indeed or whatever, but it's not working for them, but they're not necessarily taking advantage of this one because maybe there's a bias against the younger workforce or for whatever reason. So I think it's also I think our employers are on a path of evolution, just like our universities and college system are right now, of realizing in order to fill this gap and to continue to not have that gap, I think they also need to adapt, and they need to understand how to lean in and not shame someone that wants a different opportunity. I think if we make it clearer, because some of the best organizations in the world will have career conversations with their employees, and that happens on the white collar side. There's no reason it can't happen in any role. And if there's more visibility of oh, those are your career aspirations, okay, well, how can we either help you get there, or we're never going to be the person that helps you get there. So instead of it all happening in the shadows, I think we can also improve our talent pipeline and reduce some of the churn and harm that comes with some of these things with employment. If employers also lean into the idea of, oh, all right, someone's going to come in and they're going to do this thing for a bit. They're going to learn these skills. How can we help them leverage those skills for their next piece? And hopefully they stay on with us, but at least maybe not go to a competitor. I think there's something to that side too that we'll learn as we're working with more of these employers.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it also makes sense that when you source employers, there will be certain types of employers that are more your first movers towards something like Runwayz,
Exactly.
And it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see as that evolves, who comes along first and really takes advantage of the opportunity. At the same time, I think the schools, the trade schools, the community colleges that are building out some of these credential programs and doing new employer-aligned related programming, I think they have a real opportunity here to, in addition to all the other important work they're doing, plug into something like Runwayz. This is a great way for them to get a better handle on what's happening in their own communities as Runwayz develop.
Exactly. I think it will very much help, again, in this flight plan mindset. We see that community college partner or micro-credential partner is populating within that flight plan of, oh, you're ready for this credential. Here are opportunities in your area. Here's, analysis of what they cost and how to get started. I think we can streamline some of that upskilling as well.
Well, it's become really apparent to me why you're at the helm of an organization like this. I'm really looking forward to seeing how you guys go about this and some of the success that you have. I'm just curious, before we leave, we have a big higher ed audience.
Hello, my higher ed friends. I am blessed with a great community through my former work with the community college, with my community college presidents and provosts and beyond, that are just some of the most remarkable people. So I have to say, like, if you have never had the pleasure of spending time with a community college, with a member of a community college or attending a community college, that if you think about mission-based, I mean, everything they do is to serve their community. So we can't be community grown without our community college partners and with our trade school partners. I think there are many colleges and universities that operate exactly the same way as well. So, I look forward to engaging more with them. We already are on really thinking where this goes. As I mentioned, slotting in their programs to help on the recruitment side, I think is something very interesting that we're exploring. I think there's also lots of potential for even helping employment within their organizations. A lot of times we forget that many people are employers without realizing it. You have your part-time work and your volunteer work, and you have your entry-level staff work that a lot of these individuals can get started in. And many community college leaders actually went to that community college and then started as a student worker and then stayed because they just loved the mission of the community. So I think there's a lot of room. We have many conversations happening right now. I'm looking forward to how they evolve. And I think, we keep hearing I think the time has just come. I think this has been the conversation for a while, and now we're just seeing enough shift to make it possible. So I look forward to us being able to be involved. We hope to a large degree, even if it's to a small degree, that will be enough for me. It's all about the impact that we're trying to drive.
Well, I really am excited about what you guys are building.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure.